Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing good myself. First week of classes is finally over. However, if you saw my community post yesterday and the one I made today as well, then you would know that I have been incredibly sick over the last few days. It's kind of comical, honestly. I go home for winter break, I'm completely fine, I come back, and a day later, I'm completely bedridden. Okay, well that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. And if I still sound a little sick right now, then apologies for that. I'm not fully recovered yet, but I'm back to the point where, you know, I can basically function like a normal human being. And I actually feel well enough to make videos again. And with my triumphant return, we will be talking about the part 2 of the indie dev who is salty that Vampire Survivors is a major success. But anyway, I've already kept you guys waiting several days. So without further ado, let's get into this.
The following is an addendum to my previous video on the game Vampire Survivors. Please watch that one before continuing here. If there's one video I've made I never expected to see any pushback from, it was my piece on Vampire Survivors. I'll readily admit that I'm not satisfied with how that video came out. I don't believe that it's up to the standard of depth and clarity that I always try to reach on this channel.
Well, that's a little strange to me, dude, because in your last video you were saying how popular it was and how much everybody liked it, and yet you didn't expect to get pushback from it. That would be like if I made a review hating on Elden Ring, and then all of a sudden I was surprised when I got pushback from it. If you hate something that's popular, you're gonna get pushback. That's just how it works. And also, if you're not fully satisfied with how a video's coming out, you probably shouldn't put it out. You should keep working until it's up to your full satisfaction. I mean, I'll use myself as an example. Sometimes I'll re-record a line that I say like 15 or 20 times because I'm not satisfied with it. But anyway, let's keep going.
I rushed the writing process for a number of reasons. The main one being, I believed the game was so self-evidently worthless that I didn't have to explain myself as much as I usually do. While the overall reception was positive, it was one of the only videos I've made which reached outside the bubble of my usual audience, and so there was inevitably a handful of misunderstandings and disagreements I'd like to respond to.
Okay, dude, here's a little tip. Maybe don't lie within the first minute of your video. Your video was not received mostly well, and it wasn't just a handful of people who disagreed with you. What did that video have, like 100 likes and 1,800 dislikes or something like that? And this one is almost as bad. Also, I love that really passive-aggressive way of calling people stupid, where he says, oh, I thought it was so self-evident that I didn't even need to explain it, even though you admitted early on in the video that it's extremely popular and a ton of people love it. This video is off to a fantastic start, I must say.
There's also some additional details about the game I'd like to discuss that I wasn't aware of when writing my initial video. The way I see it, there are two main arguments against my stance on this game, neither of which hold much water. The first is that Vampire Survivors actually involves strategic skill and gameplay depth. Now, what exactly about this game is supposed to be deep, I'm not sure. No one's been able to tell me yet. My best guess is people are referring to the character building system, but as I said in my prior video, the large number of build options doesn't create meaningful decision making, since the options you have available are decided randomly, and player control is so limited that what choices you do make have no real effect on your playstyle.
Dude, you clearly learned nothing from last video, and you clearly have not progressed far at all in the game since the last video. But since nobody's been able to tell you what's so deep about the game, I'll go ahead and tell you. It's all the strategizing that you do, combining different weapons and passive abilities to form better weapons. And depending on which starting character you pick, you're going to need to pick different weapons, because different weapons will be able to protect you from different ranges. And even though there's only one combination per item, some items that don't combine to form a stronger item still go well together. For example, any AoE attack and the candelabra, because the candelabra increases your area by 10%. And like I said in the last video, yes, it is random, but if you progress far enough into the game, you get different items that can help you either skip or banish certain items. So you're right about the initial part of the game, but you're completely wrong once you actually get into it.
Furthermore, the entire point of the progression system is to remove skill and decision-making from the equation. It's actually mathematically impossible to beat the game on a fresh save file. Your base stats are simply not big enough to outpace your enemy's growth. Despite a complete run of the game only taking half an hour, you are forced to grind item unlocks and permanent stat upgrades for several hours before you're even allowed to win. So if Vampire Survivors is intended to be a game of skill, it's not a very good one, is it?
My dude, you basically just described every single roguelike game that has ever existed. Of course you're not gonna win on the first try. You have no idea what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, again, like you said, the whole point is you need to keep replaying and unlocking new things and leveling up things so you can eventually win. That is called progression. To progress with really anything in a video game, you need to keep using it until you master it. That could be said for Vampire Survivors, where you have to keep learning mechanics and stuff. It could be said for Call of Duty, when you're leveling up weapons, you have to keep using the weapon and you can't just finish it out in one game. You could say it for Risk of Rain 2, which is another roguelike, because as you unlock achievements in the game by getting better and surviving longer and all that stuff, you unlock new items which you can get. Basically, you're complaining that you actually have to replay the game multiple times to unlock new stuff and get better, which, newsflash, that's how basically every single game works. Imagine complaining that a game is replayable and challenges you. I thought the whole point of your last video is that you were arguing that there was no challenge to Vampire Survivors. You were saying there was no future. You were saying that games need to challenge the player, but now that it's doing that, it's suddenly an issue? Alright, good one, bud.
And this leads me to the second main argument. More commonly, I've heard people defend the game as a sort of turn your brain off action game that's nothing more than a fun way to relax and wind down while listening to podcasts or whatever. The YouTube channel Video Games Are Bad recently discussed this directly in a video titled Contextualizing Play, which described Vampire Survivors as a Tranquil game. Now, I have no problem with games that exist to relax the player rather than challenge them, and I think there's a tremendous amount of value in frivolous, unstructured play, as I've discussed in my video on Katamari Damacy.
I mean, do you really feel that way, though? Because in your last video, again, all you were doing was complaining that Vampire Survivors didn't challenge the player, even though it does, and you're complaining that it challenges the player in this video, but now, all of a sudden, you can see the value. But here's my question. If you have no problem with games that are there to relax the player instead of challenge them, then why did you say in your last video that the whole point of game design is to challenge the player and constantly keep them thinking? And all you did was crap on Vampire Survivors for not being challenging enough. This is some major backpedaling.
However, I flat out refuse to believe that Vampire Survivors is one of these Tranquil games. To explain why, we need to look into the man behind the game. An interview with The Verge that I've linked in the description below explains that Luca Galante, Vampire Survivors' creator, previously worked in the gambling industry, and as Luca explains, the game was specifically made using the techniques and practices he learned while working on slot machines. This is the most damning thing anyone could ever say about their game, and yet in this interview it is treated as an unquestioned good. Just another reason that Vampire Survivors is such an exciting and fresh indie hit.
Well, I will say, him working in the gambling industry definitely makes sense because he knows how to make an addictive game. But this game being addictive isn't a bad thing. It's not like the actual casino where you're wasting away your entire life savings just in the hope that you have a chance of making an insane amount of money. It's just a fun video game, and it doesn't have any microtransactions. Now, if you made this argument about like Call of Duty, then I would agree. The game is not designed to be fun. The game is designed to get you addicted, so you'll spend money on microtransactions. That is an issue, but this game being addictive is not an issue. You're not losing anything by getting addicted to this game. And why is it so bad for people to want to feel good about something? Why is it so bad that the game makes them feel good because they're accomplishing things? That's what video games are meant to do. They're supposed to be fun and fill you with a sense of accomplishment. It doesn't go any deeper than that.
This is not a game that exists to help you wind down. It exists to hook you. It wants dozens of hours of your life, not just the minutes you spend catching your breath on a lunch break. Purposefully indistinguishable from gambling design, it relies on random chance to produce outcomes, while retaining just enough skill in its gameplay to trick your brain into thinking that your successes and failures are your own.
So now this is as bad as gambling. Do I have that right? A $5 indie game with no microtransactions that has some satisfying gameplay elements is as bad as wasting your entire life savings in the hope that you might get rich. Do I have this right? But yes, dude, it is a game that exists to wind you down. If it didn't exist to do that, then why is everybody saying how relaxing it is? Why does everybody say that it's such a nice stress reliever? And oh my god, I cannot get over the fact that he said this is indistinguishable from gambling. Because one, you're not losing any money in this game because there's no microtransactions. But two, it's not completely random chance. Even from the random chance, you get to pick stuff. And again, you can completely eliminate the random chance later on in the game. So to say that this is no different from gambling, oh my god. As Captain Price once said, "Aye, lie of the century that is."
It operates on the same kind of loop which Natasha Dow describes in her book Addiction by Design, where she explains how gambling addicts typically aren't playing to win, but instead playing to reach a zen-like zone state, where the whole world falls away from them. The repetition found within devices like slot machines is one of the primary factors which sends players into this state, forming habits and then later addictions. Slot machine designers, of course, have become extremely good at exploiting that for profit.
Okay, but this dude isn't exploiting us for profit. It's a one-time payment of $5 to get the game. And also, what's wrong with people wanting to reach a calm zen state? The whole point of a video game is to be fun and to relax you. And a lot of the people who play video games do so to escape the real world. So I don't really see what the problem is here. Again, it's not like people are blowing their life savings. You pay a one-time fee of $5, and then after you pay that money, you get addicted. It's not like real gambling where you pay and then you do it and then you don't win and then you get addicted and you repeat the cycle.
It reminds me of one of my biggest bugbears within games criticism, the term gameplay loop. I despise it as a term, and I despise it even more as a concept, because even though game actions can always be boiled down into repetitive loops, good games, like say Resident Evil 4, strive to include variation within their mechanics and situations to continuously shock the player out of the loop, to keep them on their toes and prevent repetitive looping habits from forming. But coming at game development with the idea that strict adherence to a loop is something admirable results in projects like Vampire Survivors, where gameplay can truly be boiled down into a single loop, every run the same as the last, hours upon hours, bleeding together in a brain fog of nothing.
Okay, but the problem with the Resident Evil 4 thing is that after you play the game, you're gonna be used to all that stuff, and then if you play the game again, guess what? It's a loop. Pretty much every single game that has ever existed on planet Earth has had a gameplay loop. And also, there is variation in the mechanics in this game. It's not always just trying to survive for 30 minutes. A lot of the game is trying to unlock secret characters by finding hidden locations on the map, or finding secret items that can help you survive past the 30-minute mark. Vampire Survivors does have these elements that break up the normal loop, but again, you wouldn't know that because you probably haven't put more than 2 hours into the game.
You've reached that zone. You're not winning, you're not thinking, but hey, at least you're passing the time. So whenever you hear the words gameplay loop, I want you to replace it in your mind with the words compulsion loop, because that's ultimately what games like this are. Systems crafted not to develop skills or ideas or narratives, but compulsions. Stringing players along until they feel they have no choice but to keep playing again and again and again and again.
I mean, dude, if people don't want to play the game, they can just, stop. It's not like the developer is some evil mad scientist who has their family locked up and it's like, oh, if you don't play this game every time you get off of work to feel satisfied, I'm gonna kill your whole family. Like, no, that's not what this is. It's just a fun video game. And also that whole thing about stringing players along, usually when you string somebody along, that means that, oh, you're pretending you're gonna lead them somewhere and then you never do. With Vampire Survivors, you will eventually achieve your goal. That's guaranteed. However, it's not guaranteed with actual gambling. That's why actual gambling is predatory and this game is not. You lose nothing by having fun playing this game. And one last thing, I love how at the very beginning he's like, oh, I want you to think of it like this. Like he's one of my professors or something like that. It's like, okay, students, instead of thinking of this as the mitochondria, we're gonna think of it as the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah, I know it's an old meme. Get over it.
As game designers, we have a responsibility to prevent malicious habits and addictions whenever possible. So slot machine design, as well as the people like Luca who openly brag about using it, should have no place in the games industry. And the reporters who spread his drivel without questioning his background or intentions in any way should feel ashamed of themselves. Claiming that Vampire Survivors is harmless fun, knowingly or unknowingly, is playing defense for the exact same kinds of practices that casinos are built on.
Okay, but the difference between this game and a casino is a casino can easily ruin your life. This game cannot. There's nothing dangerous or inherently evil about this game. It's just fun. But good God, the amount of hatred and malice this dude has towards this game is crazy. This developer has no place in the games industry, and the journalists who report on this should feel ashamed. Like, Jesus Christ. Speaking of Jesus Christ, this dude is basically acting like this game is the Antichrist.
It speaks to a blind spot gamers have, where because we get addicted to a game, it must therefore be good and well designed, and we seek out excuses to justify the addiction to ourselves. There's been a worrying lack of pushback towards the game, even from the people I normally would have expected to be speaking out against it. James Stephanie Sterling, for instance, is someone who has built their career campaigning against this exact strain of game design within the AAA industry, and yet here they are, sitting in Vampire Survivors' credits list as a writer for the project.
Alright, first of all, major L for citing Jim Sterling as a credible source. But putting that aside, dude, have you ever stopped to think for a second? And I feel like I say this with a lot of fanboys and stuff as well, but if nobody agrees with you, and if even people who you would think would be on your side aren't, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's because you can't put aside your hatred and jealousy towards this game. It's not us tricking ourselves into thinking the game is good. The game is legitimately good. And the fact that you have the gall to sit here and say, oh, I'm right, even though I'm in the minority and everybody else is brainwashed, you're basically calling everybody stupid. I can say with 100% confidence, this video is officially worse than the last one.
What people like Sterling have shown is that even the most ardent opponents of manipulative design practices will not only turn a blind eye towards them, but actively celebrate them as long as no microtransactions are present. It is a phenomenally short-sighted viewpoint and has completely shattered my trust that anyone claiming to be an expert in this field actually cares about the well-being of games and the people who play them.
So now if you disagree with this guy, you don't care about the well-being of gamers. I'm actually done. Well, actually I can't be. We still have one more clip to look at. Alright, let's just rip the band-aid off and get this over with.
And of course there are bigger fish to fry than Vampire Survivors. There are games that are more evil, more predatory, more manipulative, but my goal in crusading against this game is to remind everyone that it is not enough to just reject the monetization aspects of slot machine design. Art which serves no broader societal function than to cultivate habits and addictions should be shunned in whatever form it takes, and that includes Vampire Survivors.
This man did not just say he's leading a crusade against Vampire Survivors. That's it. I know what my thumbnail is going to be. But anyway, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. And before I go, I just want to really quickly say thank you all so much for 6,000 subscribers. I'm pretty sure in August I was at like less than 1,000, so this is absolutely insane. And the fact that it happened when I haven't uploaded in like, what, 4 or 5 days is honestly just a blessing. So yeah, thank you all so much for the ridiculous support, even when I have to take a break. Yeah, with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you all next time.